A little girl was forced to sleep outside in the freezing cold by the very man who was supposed to protect her. But just when her tears turned to silence, a millionaire driving past saw everything, and what he did next changed her life forever. This is their story. Stay with me until the end, because you won't believe how it all unfolds. The night air was biting, the kind of sharp winter chill that crept into the lungs and made every breath feel like a stab of ice. The Collins house sat on the edge of the quiet neighborhood, its windows glowing faintly against the darkness. Inside, laughter and warmth should have lived there. Instead, silence and shadows filled every corner. 7-year-old Anna Collins sat on the worn rug of the living room, hugging her small arms around herself. She clutched a frayed woolen scarf that had once belonged to her mother. It still carried a faint, comforting scent, lavender and soap, though the fabric had faded after too many washes. Anna pressed her face against it, desperate for a trace of warmth. Her mother had been gone for just 6 months, taken far too early by what everyone called a sudden illness. The funeral had been crowded with distant relatives and neighbors whispering condolences, but after the flowers wilted and the mourners left, Anna was left with only her stepfather, Mark, and his wife, a woman who wore a smile as cold as polished glass. Mark Collins had married Anna's mother only 3 years ago. At first, he had seemed kind, even indulgent. But when Anna's mother grew sick and then passed away, his true face revealed itself. What had once been half-hearted tolerance turned into irritation, then into contempt, and now into open cruelty. That evening, Mark stood in the kitchen doorway, his broad shoulders blocking out the weak light from the lamp above. His voice cut through the silence, harsh and jagged. "Didn't I tell you to stay out of my sight, Anna? Why are you still sitting there like a stray dog?" Anna flinched but didn't answer. She squeezed the scarf tighter, her small body trembling. "Answer me," Mark barked, his heavy boots echoing against the wooden floor as he crossed the room. He stopped in front of her, looming tall, his shadow swallowing her tiny figure. I'm sorry," Anna whispered, her voice fragile. "I'll be quiet. I'll go to my room." But Mark's lips curled into a sneer. "Your room? You think you deserve a room in this house? Everything here belongs to me. You're nothing but a burden. Do you hear me?" Anna nodded quickly, eyes stinging with unshed tears. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor. Mark bent down, his face inches from hers. His breath smelled of cheap whiskey. "Then get out. If you want to cling to that scarf and pretend you belong here, you can do it outside." Her heart thudded. She thought she had misheard. "Oh, outside? But it's cold." His hand shot out, yanking the scarf from her grip. Anna cried out, scrambling to hold on, but he shoved her back with such force that she fell against the edge of the sofa, the impact knocking the breath from her chest. "You heard me," he growled, yanking her small coat from the hook by the door. He shoved it against her chest. "Out. Now." Anna's knees buckled as she stood. "Please. I'll clean the kitchen. I'll be quiet. Out." His shout was thunder in the room. The next thing she knew, the door slammed open and the winter wind howled in. Mark grabbed her by the collar of her coat, dragged her across the threshold, and shoved her out into the night. The door slammed shut behind her, the lock clicking in place. The world outside was dark and merciless. The cold bit into her skin immediately, and she staggered onto the frosted ground, nearly slipping. Bare branches rattled in the wind like bones clattering together. The night pressed in, silent except for the hollow rustling of leaves and the faraway bark of a dog. Anna wrapped her coat tightly around herself, but it was thin, too thin. The icy air pierced straight through the fabric, chilling her to the bone. She sank to her knees on the cold stone steps, hugging herself and rocking slightly to stay warm. Her lips trembled as she whispered into the darkness, "Mama, why did you leave me here? I don't know what to do." The tears came hot at first, but quickly froze against her cheeks. She buried her face into her hands, shivering violently. Minutes dragged into what felt like hours. Her small body shook with every gust of wind. She pressed her back against the wooden door, but it remained locked and unyielding. No one inside cared to hear her cries. Her little voice broke the silence again, weaker this time. "I promise. I'll be good. Please let me in." But only the creak of the trees answered her. As Anna curled tighter into herself, her eyes grew heavy with exhaustion. Cold seeped into her bones until it hurt just to breathe. She tried to hum the lullaby her mother used to sing, a faint melody, broken by sobs, but the sound was swallowed by the night. And then, the faint rumble of an engine. Headlights cut across the dark street, glowing brighter and brighter until they bathed the Collins house in a sharp white light. Anna squinted, lifting her head weakly. A sleek, black luxury car pulled up to the curb with a soft purr of its engine. The door opened slowly, deliberately, and a tall man stepped out. He wore a tailored coat, dark wool that caught the light like midnight water. His shoes crunched against the frosted pavement as he froze at the sight before him. A little girl, no more than 7, huddled on the frozen steps of a locked house. Her coat too thin, her cheeks pale, her tiny hands trembling as she clutched the hem of her sleeve for warmth. The man's eyes narrowed, a storm of emotions flickering across his face, shock, anger, and something deeper, something buried under years of silence. He remembered in an instant a boy who had once been left out in the cold too. A boy who had pressed his back against a locked door, praying someone would open it. His chest tightened as memory and reality collided. The man took a step closer, his breath visible in the frosty air. His voice came low, hoarse, but steady. "What is going on here?" Anna blinked at him, her wide eyes shimmering with fear and faint hope. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She tried to form words, but only a broken whisper escaped. They told me to stay outside." The man clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He turned his gaze toward the darkened windows of the house, then back to the fragile child before him. His voice dropped, steadier this time. "Who told you that?" Anna shook her head quickly, shrinking back against the door as if afraid to say more. She clutched the scarf still half hanging from her pocket, holding it like a lifeline. The man exhaled, his expression hardening with resolve. He took off his heavy coat in one smooth motion and crouched down, draping it gently over Anna's small shoulders. The fabric engulfed her, its lingering warmth a shield against the icy night. For the first time that evening, Anna felt heat seep back into her frozen body. Her lips trembled as she looked up at him, eyes filling with fresh tears. Her small voice cracked. "Are you going to leave me too?" The man's chest ached. He looked at her, really looked, and saw not just a shivering child but himself years ago. Alone. Forgotten. "No," he said quietly, each word deliberate, firm. "Not tonight. Not ever." He placed a steady hand on her shoulder, grounding her trembling frame. And as the winter wind howled around them, the man made a silent promise. Whatever cruelty had left this child in the cold, he would not allow it to continue. Not while he was here. The winter night deepened, the street eerily quiet except for the faint hum of the luxury car idling by the curb. Its headlights still spilled across the Collins front steps, casting Anna and the stranger in a harsh white glow. Snowflakes began to drift lazily from the sky, swirling in the wind before melting on the pavement. The man crouched beside Anna, his coat still wrapped snugly around her trembling frame. For a long moment, he said nothing. His sharp eyes were fixed on the locked door behind her, his jaw tight, as though he were restraining an anger that threatened to spill over. Anna's lips quivered. The words that had slipped out of her moments earlier, "Are you going to leave me too?" still hung in the air between them like fragile glass. He finally spoke, his voice low, steady, but tinged with something raw. "What's your name, little one?" Anna hesitated, clutching the edge of the coat as though it were the only thing anchoring her. Her voice came small, uncertain. Anna. Anna," he repeated softly, as though testing the weight of it. "Do you live here?" She nodded once, eyes dropping to the frozen ground. "With my stepdad." "Your stepdad?" His tone hardened. "And he left you outside like this?" Anna's shoulders hunched, her small hands fisting in the fabric of the coat. She didn't answer. Silence pressed between them, broken only by the groan of the wind against the house. The man studied her face, the pale skin, the red rim of her eyes, the way her breath came in shallow, quick bursts. His chest tightened, memories rising unbidden. A boy of 10, crouched in a dark stairwell, ears straining for the heavy boots of a drunken stepfather. A boy who learned early that love could vanish, replaced by fists and locked doors. He swallowed, forcing the memory back down. This wasn't about him. This was about her. He straightened, his tall frame blocking the cold wind, and knocked sharply on the wooden door. His fist thudded against it once, twice, echoing through the house. A long silence followed, then the scrape of heavy footsteps inside. The door creaked open an inch, and Mark Collins' face appeared in the sliver of light. His eyes, bleary from drink, widened in irritation when he saw the stranger standing on his steps. "What the hell do you want at this hour?" Mark slurred, his words edged with hostility. The man's eyes hardened. "Why is this child outside in the cold?" Mark blinked, then let out a scoff. "That brat? She's been acting up all night. Needed some discipline. It's none of your business." Discipline? The stranger's voice dropped lower, carrying a quiet fury. She's a child. She's freezing. Mark's lip curled in disdain. Listen, whoever you are, I don't need a lecture. This is my house, my kid. You don't get to tell me how to raise her. She's not your kid, the man snapped, his composure cracking for the first time. You don't leave a child outside to freeze. That's not discipline, it's cruelty. Mark's face darkened. He shoved the door open wider, stepping onto the porch. The smell of whiskey clung to him. His posture was wide, threatening. And who exactly are you to stick your nose in? Mark spat. Some rich fool who thinks he can play the hero? Drive away before I call the cops. The stranger didn't flinch. His voice sharpened, each word cutting like glass. My name is Daniel Hayes, and I don't walk away when a child is suffering. The name seemed to hang in the air. Daniel Hayes, a figure whispered about in business circles, his face sometimes appearing in glossy magazines. A self-made millionaire, known for his ruthless strategies in real estate, but also for his silence about his personal life. Mark, however, only sneered. I don't care if you're the King of England. You don't belong here. Now get off my property. Daniel's gaze flickered briefly to Anna, still huddled on the step, her small hands gripping his coat as though terrified he would leave. Something within him solidified. He turned back to Mark, his tone calm, unyielding. She's coming with me tonight. Mark let out a harsh laugh, the sound echoing into the cold night. You think you can just take her? You've got some nerve. He leaned down, his face inches from Daniel's. Try it, and I'll make sure you regret it. Daniel didn't move. His eyes bored into Mark's, steady and unwavering. You already left her to freeze once. If I walk away now, she might not survive the night. That's not a risk I'll take. For a moment, the two men stood locked in a silent standoff, the air thick with tension. Mark's fists clenched, his shoulders rising as though ready to strike. But then, from deeper inside the house, a woman's voice called out sharply. Mark, what's going on out there? A figure appeared in the hallway light, Elaine, Mark's wife. She wore a silk robe, her face sharp, her eyes narrowing when they landed on Anna. Why is she still out there? Elaine hissed. I told you to deal with her quietly. Daniel's eyes flicked between them, realization dawning. This wasn't a moment of drunken impulse. This was deliberate. They had agreed to throw the child out. His jaw tightened. He bent down, lifted Anna gently into his arms, and wrapped the coat tighter around her small frame. She pressed her face into his shoulder, trembling, but clung to him as though she had finally found an anchor in the storm. Elaine stepped forward, her voice rising. Where do you think you're taking her? She belongs in this house. She's ours to handle. Daniel turned, his eyes cold. No. She belongs to no one who would treat her like this. Elaine's face twisted, but Mark placed a hand on her arm, muttering low. Let him go. He'll bring her back. They always come back. Elaine hesitated, then forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Fine. Take her. But don't say we didn't warn you. That girl, she's nothing but trouble. Daniel didn't answer. He walked down the steps, each stride measured, controlled. He opened the car door, eased Anna into the back seat, and tucked the coat around her before sliding in beside her. The engine purred, the headlights cut through the darkness, and the Collins house shrank in the rearview mirror. Inside the warm car, Anna sat silent, her small hands gripping the fabric of his coat like it might vanish at any moment. Daniel glanced at her through the mirror. Her eyes, wide and shimmering, were fixed on him with a mixture of fear and fragile hope. He softened his tone. You're safe now. Do you understand? She blinked, a single tear sliding down her cheek. Will you take me back? His grip on the wheel tightened, knuckles pale. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, slowly, firmly, he said, Not unless you want to go back. Do you want that, Anna? Her head shook violently, almost panicked. No, please no. I'll be good. I'll clean. I won't talk too much. Just don't make me go back. The words pierced him. He drew in a breath, steadying the storm inside his chest. You don't have to earn kindness, Anna. You don't have to beg for a place to stay. No one should treat you like that. Her lips trembled. She lowered her gaze, whispering so softly he almost didn't hear. But they said no one wants me. That I'm just bad luck. Daniel's throat tightened. He thought of himself at her age, told he was worthless, cursed, unlovable. The same words, recycled through generations of cruelty. He spoke quietly, but with unshakable conviction. They're wrong. You hear me? You are not bad luck. You are not unwanted. And as long as I'm here, you will never be left in the cold again. Anna's breath hitched. For the first time that night, her rigid frame eased slightly, as though the words had reached past the fear and settled somewhere deep within. She curled against the seat, still clutching the scarf from her pocket, and closed her eyes. Daniel drove in silence, the city lights passing in blurred streaks outside. His mind churned with questions. Who were these people to her? Why had Richard's daughter, Richard Collins, his old business acquaintance, ended up in the hands of such cruel guardians? And why had no one stepped in until now? The weight of responsibility pressed heavier with each passing mile. He had promised himself years ago he would never relive his own past, never be bound to the chains of childhood misery. Yet tonight, fate had delivered this fragile child into his hands. He pulled into the underground garage of his high-rise apartment. The security guard gave him a polite nod, his eyes briefly flicking to the small, sleeping figure in the back seat. Daniel offered no explanation, only lifted Anna carefully into his arms again. She stirred but didn't wake, her cheek resting against his chest. The elevator ride felt endless, the soft hum filling the silence. When the doors slid open, Daniel stepped into the quiet hallway, his polished shoes muffled against the carpet. He unlocked his penthouse door and entered the vast, dimly lit space. For years, the apartment had been a fortress of solitude, glass walls, minimalist furniture, immaculate order. A place where no laughter echoed, no toys cluttered the floor, no child's footsteps ran down the hall. Now for the first time, its silence felt different. Oppressive. Empty. Daniel carried Anna into the guest room and laid her gently on the bed. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Where am I?" "You're safe," Daniel said softly, kneeling beside her. "This is my home. You can rest here tonight." She blinked at him, uncertain, then whispered, "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" For a moment, he froze. He had not stayed beside anyone's bed in decades. But something in her trembling gaze unraveled his hesitation. He nodded once, pulled a chair closer, and sat. Anna clutched her scarf and curled into the blanket. Her breathing slowed, her eyelids heavy, until finally she slipped into sleep. Daniel remained, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. His own thoughts whispered relentlessly, memories of nights he had begged for the same comfort, nights no one came. He looked at her and made a vow he had once thought himself incapable of making. "This child will not be abandoned. Not while I breathe." Outside, the city glittered against the black sky. Inside, a fragile thread of fate had been tied, one that would unravel secrets, stir old wounds, and set in motion a battle far greater than Daniel had anticipated. And as he finally rose, turning off the light, he didn't notice the small tear slipping down Anna's cheek even in her dreams. She had found warmth for the night, but shadows from the past still lingered, waiting for the day they would demand to be faced. The apartment was quiet, too quiet for a child. The polished glass walls reflected the muted glow of the city outside, stretching like a sea of scattered stars. Expensive furniture sat perfectly arranged, untouched, as though no one had ever truly lived here. Anna sat on the edge of the guest bed, her small hands fidgeting with the scarf in her lap. The oversized blanket swallowed her frame, but the warmth had not yet reached the cold lodged deep in her bones. Her wide eyes flickered around the unfamiliar room, the sleek desk, the moon-shaped night lamp, the faint hum of the heating system, but nothing here felt like home. Daniel stood in the doorway, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. For years, this apartment had been his sanctuary from the world, a fortress of solitude built high above the city. He had never thought twice about the silence, had even welcomed it. But tonight, with a child sitting small and fragile against the backdrop of all this emptiness, the silence felt oppressive. He cleared his throat softly, his voice steady but not unkind. "Are you hungry?" Anna glanced up quickly, almost guiltily, as though afraid of being scolded for wanting anything. She shook her head. "No, sir. I don't need food. I'll be fine." Daniel frowned. Even her refusal carried the weight of fear, as though she had learned that needing things meant punishment. He stepped into the room, crouched down so his eyes were level with hers. "You don't have to pretend, Anna. If you're hungry, you can say so. No one here will yell at you for it." Her lips parted, hesitation flickering across her face. She pressed the scarf to her chest, then whispered, "Maybe just a little." Daniel nodded once, a quiet reassurance. "Wait here. I'll bring you something warm." He left the room, his footsteps echoing softly down the hallway. In the kitchen, he moved with unusual care. He was a man used to late-night coffee, quick meals eaten standing at the counter, contracts spread open under dim light. Cooking for a child was foreign to him, yet he found himself ladling chicken soup into a small bowl, carefully placing a spoon beside it, as though the act itself required precision. When he returned, Anna was still perched on the edge of the bed, her scarf clutched like armor. He set the tray gently on the nightstand and slid the bowl in front of her. "Here," he said, his tone softer now. "It's hot. Take your time." Anna's fingers wrapped around the spoon, tentative, like she half expected him to snatch it away. She scooped a small bite, blew on it gently, and tasted. Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, the warmth spreading through her chest like a fragile spark of comfort. Daniel sat across from her, not rushing her, simply watching. Each small spoonful seemed like a victory, a reminder that survival wasn't always about grand gestures, but sometimes about the quiet act of eating in peace. Halfway through, Anna set the spoon down, her small voice breaking the silence. "I don't want to eat too much. They used to say I was greedy." Daniel's jaw tightened. He forced his voice calm. "Here, no one will call you that. You eat when you're hungry. That's all." She blinked at him, as if waiting for a catch, then took another small spoonful. When the bowl was empty, Daniel gathered the tray, but Anna quickly reached out, her voice panicked. "I'll clean it. Please let me clean it." Daniel froze, the tray balanced in his hands. Slowly, he set it back down and knelt in front of her. "Anna, you don't have to beg to clean. This isn't a test. You're allowed to rest." Her eyes shimmered with confusion, her lips trembling. She whispered, almost inaudibly, "But if I don't clean, they get angry." Daniel drew in a long breath. In her trembling words, he heard echoes of his own past, his stepfather's drunken voice, the sting of blows when a single dish was left out of place. His chest ached with the memory. "You're not there anymore," he said firmly. "You're here. And here, no one will hurt you for resting." Anna studied him, as though trying to decipher truth from kindness. At last, she nodded faintly, though her hands still twisted in her scarf, betraying her unease. That night, Daniel guided her to lie down. He switched on the moon-shaped lamp, its soft glow casting gentle light across the room. He set a glass of water by the bed and drew the blanket over her small frame. Anna clutched the scarf tightly, her eyes wide in the dim light. After a long silence, her voice trembled. "Well, will you leave the door open?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Of course." She gave a small nod and turned onto her side. For a while, the room filled only with the sound of her shallow breathing, uneven as she fought the weight of sleep. Then faintly a soft sob broke through. Daniel stood just outside the door, his back against the wall. He didn't intrude, didn't speak. He simply listened, the sobs growing softer, breaking into hiccups, then fading into silence. His own eyes burned. He remembered nights when he, too, had cried quietly into a pillow, praying the walls would swallow the sound. Nights when he had begged for someone to sit outside the door, just so he wouldn't feel alone. And now, standing outside this room, he realized, perhaps he could be the presence he had once longed for. Hours passed. The city outside fell into deeper quiet. Finally, Daniel eased into his office. He switched on the lamp, pulled out his laptop, and typed a message to his attorney. Need advice on guardianship. Urgent. Call in the morning. He leaned back in the chair, rubbing his temples. His entire life had been built on control, calculating risks, predicting outcomes, never leaving anything to chance. But tonight, one fragile child had shattered that order. He hadn't planned to become anyone's guardian. He hadn't planned to reopen wounds buried for decades. And yet, he couldn't turn away. Not now. In the morning, sunlight spilled through the wide windows. The apartment seemed different, as though the presence of a child had softened its edges. Daniel stepped quietly into the guest room. Anna was already awake, standing on tiptoe by the window, clutching her scarf. She turned when she heard him, her expression caught between fear and wonder. "Is it okay that I looked outside?" she asked quickly, her voice anxious. Daniel's expression softened. "Of course it's okay. You don't need permission to look at the sky." She blinked at him, surprised by the answer. For a moment, her small lips curled upward in something like the beginning of a smile. He motioned toward the kitchen. "Come. Let's have breakfast." Anna followed him hesitantly, her bare feet silent against the polished floor. She sat at the dining table, her hands folded neatly in her lap, watching as Daniel prepared simple food, scrambled eggs, toast, fruit. She ate slowly, carefully, as though every bite was measured against invisible rules. Midway through, she looked up. Do you live here all by yourself?" Daniel paused, setting down his coffee. "Yes. It's been just me for a long time." Her brows furrowed, the question innocent but piercing. "Doesn't it get lonely?" For a moment, Daniel was caught off guard. Loneliness was a constant companion he had long ago stopped naming. He thought of the silence in these rooms, the absence of laughter, the walls that had never echoed with warmth. He thought of how easily he had convinced himself solitude was strength. He gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. Sometimes. Anna lowered her gaze, whispering into her scarf. Me too. The words hung in the air, delicate and devastating. Two lives, scarred by abandonment, meeting across the breakfast table. Daniel exhaled slowly, his voice steady. Maybe it doesn't have to be that way anymore. Anna tilted her head, uncertain, but the smallest spark of hope flickered in her eyes. Later that morning, while Anna busied herself with drawing shapes on a scrap of paper Daniel had given her, his phone buzzed. It was Anderson, his attorney. Daniel stepped into his office to answer. Guardianship? Anderson's calm voice crackled through the line. That's not simple, Daniel. You'll need evidence that her current guardians are unfit. Do you have that? Daniel's eyes darkened. He glanced toward the guest room, where Anna sat quietly sketching with a stubby pencil. I have enough. I saw it with my own eyes. Seeing is not proof, Anderson cautioned. We'll need documentation, witnesses, something official. Otherwise, they'll claim you kidnapped her. The word struck like a stone. Kidnap. Legally, that's what it could be seen as. But Daniel's resolve only hardened. Then we'll get proof. Whatever it takes. He hung up, his jaw tight. For Anna's sake, he would not let the law twist kindness into crime. He would gather evidence. He would fight. Back in the guest room, Anna looked up from her drawing. She held up the paper shyly, a crooked house, a stick-figure girl, and beside her, a taller figure holding her hand. Is that us? Daniel asked softly. She nodded, cheeks pink. I hope it's okay. Daniel stared at the drawing, his chest tightening. It was the first time in years anyone had drawn him in a picture that wasn't framed in a newspaper. A simple sketch, yet more meaningful than all the headlines in the world. He crouched beside her. It's more than okay, Anna. It's perfect. For the first time, her lips curved into a fragile smile. But as light filled the apartment, shadows gathered elsewhere. At the Collins house, Mark slammed a fist onto the table, rage twisting his face. He thinks he can take her? That rich bastard doesn't know who he's dealing with. Elaine's eyes glinted coldly. Then let him keep her for now. The girl holds the key to Richard's estate. One way or another, she will come back to us. And when she does, she won't escape again. Outside the window of Daniel's penthouse, the city gleamed innocently under the sun. Inside, a fragile bond was beginning to form, one that would soon be tested by truths buried too long. Anna traced the lines of her drawing with her finger, whispering softly to herself. Please don't leave me too. Daniel heard her, though she thought he hadn't. And silently he vowed once more, I won't. The day after Anna's arrival, the apartment felt different, as though the walls themselves had taken a breath after years of silence. For Daniel, who had lived surrounded by sleek surfaces and cold echoes, the faint sound of a child's footsteps down the hall seemed to soften everything. He found himself listening for her movements, the small scrape of a chair, the delicate clearing of her throat, proof that the space was no longer lifeless. Anna, however, still carried the wariness of a cornered bird. She stayed close to the guest room, rarely wandering far, her scarf always wound tightly around her hands. She spoke in a small voice, asking for little, expecting less. And though she had eaten her meals without protest, she often glanced at Daniel, as if waiting for the moment his kindness would break and the cruelty she was used to would return. That morning, Daniel invited her to sit by the window with him. The city stretched endlessly beneath them, a maze of streets and flashing lights. Anna pressed her nose gently against the glass, her breath leaving a small foggy circle. It looks so big, she whispered. It is, Daniel replied. But it's not as scary as it seems. Every light out there is someone's home. Someone's story. Anna tilted her head, considering his words. Then, with hesitant fingers, she reached beneath her collar and pulled out a small chain. At the end of it dangled a locket, old and slightly tarnished, the clasp scratched from years of wear. Daniel noticed the way her hands trembled slightly as she held it out, her voice soft. My mama gave this to me. She said, I should never take it off. His chest tightened at the tenderness in her words. Carefully, he leaned closer. May I see it? Anna hesitated, her small fingers clutching the locket protectively. For a long moment, she seemed torn. Then slowly she placed it in his hand, her eyes following every movement as though afraid it would vanish. The locket was warm from her skin. Daniel turned it gently in his palm, noticing the delicate engravings, a swirl of roses nearly rubbed smooth. He pressed the clasp and opened it. Inside, a faded photograph smiled up at him, a woman with gentle eyes and hair that framed her face in soft waves. Anna's mother. Daniel exhaled quietly. The resemblance was undeniable, Anna's same eyes, the same curve of her mouth. He could almost feel the warmth this woman must have carried, the softness that Anna still clung to in memory. But there was more. Tucked behind the photograph, barely visible, was a sliver of paper, folded so tightly it was almost part of the frame itself. Daniel frowned, carefully teasing it out. Anna leaned closer, curiosity flickering through her fear. "What is it?" He unfolded the scrap. It was small, almost fragile, but the writing on it was deliberate. Numbers, a date, and a key symbol etched faintly beside them. Daniel's brow furrowed. "This looks like a code." Anna's eyes widened. "Mama told me that when I got scared, I should hold the locket. She said one day I'd understand. But she never told me what it meant." He stared at the paper, unease curling in his stomach. It wasn't the kind of message a mother left lightly. The numbers resembled a safety deposit box, the date a reference, perhaps, to the day her mother passed. And the key symbol. He folded the paper back carefully and slid it into the locket, closing it once more. Handing it back, he met Anna's gaze. "Keep this safe, Anna. Whatever it is, your mother wanted you to have it. And we'll figure it out together." Anna's small fingers closed around the locket, clutching it to her chest as if it were her heartbeat. "Together?" she echoed. Daniel nodded firmly. "Together." For the first time, something unguarded passed across her face. A spark of trust, faint but real. The rest of the day moved quietly. Daniel tried to keep things simple, preparing meals, showing Anna small corners of the apartment she hadn't yet dared to explore. They sat on the couch, flipping through picture books he had quickly ordered online. Anna's laughter, soft and fleeting, slipped out once when he struggled to imitate the voices of cartoon animals. It startled Daniel more than it startled her, as though laughter were something this apartment had forgotten how to hold. Yet beneath the fragile peace, his mind turned back to the folded note. Why would Anna's mother hide such a thing in a child's locket? What danger had she foreseen? The unease gnawed at him like a shadow on the edge of the room. That evening, after Anna had finally drifted into restless sleep, Daniel sat at his desk. He pulled up a search engine, typing in the sequence of numbers. His suspicion was confirmed: banking records, safety deposit box references, all tied to the Collins family estate. His jaw tightened. So Elaine and Mark weren't just cruel, they had a motive. If Anna's mother had hidden something in that box, perhaps it held proof of inheritance or evidence of wrongdoing. And if Mark and Elaine knew, their cruelty wasn't just about control. It was about erasing Anna from the picture entirely. He shut the laptop, the weight of responsibility pressing heavier on his chest. Protecting Anna wasn't just about shielding her from cold nights or harsh words anymore. It was about shielding her from the truth that had killed her mother, and could destroy her too. The next morning, Anna found him in the kitchen, her scarf wound tight around her shoulders. "Mr. Daniel?" she asked hesitantly. "Yes." She held the locket in her hand, her eyes downcast. "Do you think Mama knew she was going to die?" The question pierced him. He crouched so his eyes met hers, his voice steady. "I think your Mama loved you more than anything, and I think she wanted to make sure you were safe, no matter what happened." Anna's lower lip trembled, but she nodded, pressing the locket close. Later that day, Daniel received another call from Anderson. The attorney's tone was clipped. "Daniel, I need to warn you. The Collins family has already contacted Child Services. They're claiming you took Anna without consent. You'll need to prepare for a legal battle." Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. His gaze shifted toward the guest room, where Anna sat quietly sketching once again. Her little world was beginning to blossom here, fragile as a flower in winter, and now, once again, someone wanted to tear it apart. "Then we'll fight," Daniel said evenly. "I won't send her back to that house." Anderson sighed. "Then start gathering everything. Photos, witnesses, anything that shows abuse. Without it, they'll twist the story against you." Daniel hung up, his resolve hardening. The locket, the hidden code, the cruelty he had witnessed, these weren't coincidences. They were threads in a tapestry of something far darker. And he would pull every thread until the truth unraveled. That evening, while Anna colored at the table, Daniel sat nearby, his laptop open. He glanced at her, her tiny fingers clutching crayons, her tongue peeking out in concentration. Such a small child, carrying such a heavy secret. Anna looked up suddenly, holding out her drawing. This time, it was of a woman with flowing hair, standing beside a little girl. Above them, in the corner, was a heart. "My mama," she said softly. "And me." Daniel swallowed hard. "It's beautiful, Anna." She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think she'd be happy I'm here with you?" His chest ached at the innocence in her question. "Yes," he said firmly. "I think she'd be very happy." Anna gave the faintest smile, though her eyes shimmered. She touched the locket, then tucked it under her collar once more. That night, as Daniel switched off the lights, he paused outside Anna's room. She was already curled beneath the blanket, her hand pressed over the locket. Her lips moved faintly, as if whispering to her mother in a dream. But while Anna slept, far across the city, Elaine Collins sat at her vanity, her voice sharp as she spoke into the phone. "He has her locket. I know it. That's why Richard gave it to the girl. He hid something inside. If Daniel finds out what it is before us, everything we've worked for is ruined." On the other end of the line, Mark's reply was cold, ruthless. "Then we take it back, one way or another." The night deepened, the city lights flickering like watchful eyes. In the penthouse, Anna slept clutching her mother's final gift. And outside, forces were already moving to steal it from her hands. The days that followed seemed deceptively calm. Daniel tried to create a rhythm for Anna, meals at regular times, quiet afternoons spent reading or drawing, short walks to nearby parks where she clung to his side, but gradually dared to look around with curiosity. He noticed how she began to eat a little more each day, how the hollow look in her eyes softened when she laughed at his awkward attempts to cook pancakes that were always slightly burned at the edges. But beneath the fragile peace, a storm was gathering. Daniel felt it in the way Anna sometimes startled at small noises, glancing toward the door as though expecting her stepfather to appear. He felt it in the clipped tone of Anderson's phone calls, where legal terms like custody hearing, evidence, and claims of abduction became part of his daily vocabulary. And he felt it in the weight of the locket around Anna's neck, a secret neither of them fully understood, but both sensed was dangerous. One evening, while Anna sat curled up with her coloring book, Daniel received an unexpected knock at the door. His stomach tightened. Few people ever visited him unannounced. He glanced at Anna. "Stay here, sweetheart. Don't move, all right?" She nodded, clutching her crayons as if they were weapons. Daniel opened the door cautiously. Standing in the hallway were two sharply dressed figures, a man in a dark suit and a woman with a leather briefcase. Their expressions were polished, but their eyes carried the glint of calculation. "Mr. Daniel Hayes?" the man asked smoothly. "Yes. We're representatives of the Collins family," the woman said, her tone clipped and rehearsed. "We're here to retrieve Anna Collins, who was taken unlawfully from her legal guardians." Daniel's hand tightened on the door. His voice came out calm but firm. "Anna is safe here. And I'll remind you, I witnessed the Collinses leaving her outside in freezing temperatures. That is neglect, plain and simple." The woman's lips curved into a professional smile that did not reach her eyes. "Neglect is a serious accusation, but we've spoken to Child Services, and unless you have concrete evidence, your word alone does not stand. If you refuse to release the child, legal action will be pursued immediately." Behind him, Daniel heard the faint shuffle of Anna's footsteps. She had peeked around the corner, her wide eyes darting between him and the strangers. The moment she saw the woman's briefcase and the man's cold stare, she froze. Then, with a small whimper, she bolted back into the guest room, slamming the door shut. The woman adjusted her glasses. "As you can see, Mr. Hayes, the child recognizes her rightful guardians. You are only making this harder for her." Daniel's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, blocking the doorway entirely. "No. She ran because she's terrified of them. And I will not let you take her back to that house." The man's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping lower. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Hayes. People like you may have money, but you don't understand the kind of influence the Collins family wields." Daniel's voice sharpened, steel beneath the calm. "Then let me be clear. I am not afraid of them. And if you ever come to my door again without a court order, I will have you removed from this building immediately." The silence between them stretched. Finally, the woman snapped her briefcase shut, her smile brittle. "Very well. Expect to hear from our lawyers." As the door closed behind them, Daniel leaned against it, exhaling slowly. His heart hammered, not from fear for himself, but from the image of Anna's terror-stricken face. He walked to the guest room and tapped gently. "Anna, it's me." The door creaked open just enough for her eyes to peek through. "Are they gone?" "Yes," he said softly. "They won't take you. Not while I'm here." Her eyes brimmed with tears. She whispered, "I don't want to go back. Please don't let them make me." Daniel knelt, so his gaze met hers. "I promise you, Anna. You're safe here. No one will take you away." She opened the door wider then, and before he could react, she flung her small arms around his neck. For a moment, Daniel froze. Then he wrapped his arms around her gently, holding her as if she were made of glass. He felt the trembling of her thin shoulders, the fragility of her trust, and the enormity of the promise he had just made. That night, long after Anna had fallen asleep, Daniel sat in the dim glow of his office. He called Anderson, recounting the encounter. "They're escalating," Anderson said grimly. "This won't stop until we make it official. If you want to protect her, we need to file for emergency guardianship immediately. That will at least prevent them from snatching her without due process." "Do it," Daniel said without hesitation. "Then you'll need to be prepared. The Collinses won't go down quietly. They'll paint you as reckless, unstable, even predatory if they have to. And without hard evidence of abuse." Anderson's voice trailed off. Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. "The evidence is there. We just need to find it." His gaze shifted to the locket lying on Anna's nightstand, faintly gleaming in the moonlight. He thought of the folded paper inside, the code, the safety deposit box. He didn't know what it contained, but he knew it mattered. And if Anna's mother had gone to such lengths to hide it, perhaps it was the proof they needed. The following morning, Daniel made a decision. After breakfast, he crouched beside Anna. "How would you feel about a little trip today?" Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Where?" "To a bank. There's something I think your mama wanted you to have. Something very important." Anna's fingers closed around her locket. She nodded slowly, though her voice trembled. "If Mama wanted it for me, then yes." They left the apartment quietly, Daniel keeping his hand on her shoulder as they stepped into the black sedan his driver had waiting. The city passed in a blur of glass towers and rushing traffic. Anna sat pressed against him, silent but watchful, her locket clutched tightly in her hand. At the bank, Daniel presented his identification and the slip of paper from the locket. The clerk's brows rose, but after a moment of hesitation, she led them to a private room. Minutes later, a safety deposit box was placed on the table. Daniel's pulse quickened as he lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue, lay a leather-bound journal and a small flash drive. Nothing else. Anna leaned forward, eyes wide. "That was Mama's," she whispered, pointing to the journal. Daniel opened it carefully. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, a mixture of diary entries and financial notes. But as he skimmed, his chest grew tight. "Richard suspect's Mark has been forging signatures. I've seen withdrawals I never approved. I fear for Anna's future. If anything happens to me, whoever finds this must protect her. Mark is dangerous. He only wants control of the estate. I won't let him destroy her childhood the way he's destroying me." The entries continued, each more alarming than the last. Mentions of arguments, veiled threats, even suspicions of poisoning in her final weeks. The journal was more than a record, it was testimony. Daniel closed it with trembling hands. "Anna," he said softly, "your mama was very brave. She knew something was wrong, and she tried to protect you. She left this so we could make sure you're safe." Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, clutching the journal to her chest. "Mama always said love would keep me safe. Maybe this is what she meant." On their way back to the car, Daniel's instincts prickled. Across the street, a black SUV lingered longer than it should have. He caught a glimpse of a familiar face behind the tinted glass, Mark, his stare sharp and venomous. Daniel pulled Anna closer, his voice low. "Get in the car, sweetheart. Quickly." As the driver pulled into traffic, Daniel glanced back. The SUV had merged behind them, keeping its distance but never straying far. His hands curled into fists. The Collinses weren't waiting for the courtroom anymore. They were hunting. Anna leaned against him, unaware of the danger trailing them. She whispered, "Mr. Daniel, do you think Mama's watching us from heaven?" He looked down at her, his chest aching. "Yes, Anna. I think she is. And I think she's very proud of you." But even as he spoke, his eyes flickered to the SUV in the mirror. The Collinses weren't done. The journal and flash drive were dangerous weapons in Daniel's hands, and the Collinses would stop at nothing to steal them back. The city lights blurred past as the chase stretched into the evening, tension coiling tight around Daniel's chest. Protecting Anna had never felt more urgent. And though the girl beside him clutched her mother's journal with innocence, Daniel knew the truth. This was no longer just about custody. This was war. The night after retrieving the journal, Daniel found himself unable to sleep. The penthouse was quiet, the only sound the low hum of the city below. Yet his mind spun restlessly, replaying every word written in that leather-bound book, every line of fear Anna's mother had etched in her delicate handwriting. He sat at his desk, the journal open before him, a glass of untouched whiskey by his hand. The entries were not merely suspicions, they were warnings, each one carrying the tremor of a woman who knew her life was in danger. Daniel turned to a page near the end, his eyes scanning the words again. Mark watches me constantly now. His temper grows sharper, his kindness colder. I can no longer trust the food he brings me. I fear he wants me gone. For Anna's sake, I must endure, but if I do not survive, whoever finds this, please protect her. Daniel closed the book with a snap, his hands shaking. He had seen cruelty before, had lived it in his own childhood, but this was something more sinister. The Collinses weren't just greedy, they were dangerous. And Anna, small and fragile, was their target. A faint creak on the staircase drew his attention. He looked up and saw Anna standing there in her nightgown, clutching a stuffed rabbit he'd bought her from a shop 2 days ago. Her bare feet made soft taps on the hardwood as she walked toward him, her eyes heavy with sleep, but shadowed with something deeper. "Can't sleep?" Daniel asked gently, pushing the journal aside. Anna shook her head. "I had a dream." She hesitated, her fingers twisting the rabbit's ear. "It was about Mama." Daniel patted the chair beside him. "Do you want to tell me about it?" She climbed onto the chair, legs dangling, her voice low. I heard her voice. She was singing like she used to. But then it stopped, and I heard shouting. I think I remember it now. It wasn't a dream. It was the night before she didn't wake up. Daniel's chest tightened. "What do you remember, sweetheart?" Anna hugged the rabbit tighter, her brow furrowing as though she were digging through fog. "Mama was in the kitchen. I was upstairs, supposed to be asleep. But I heard voices, hers and Mark's. She said something like, 'You can't do this, it's Anna's future.' And then Mark said, 'She won't remember. Kids forget.'" Her voice broke, her eyes brimming. Then there was a crash, like a glass breaking. Mama cried out. I wanted to go down, but I was scared. I hid under the blanket until everything was quiet. The next morning, she didn't wake up. Daniel's throat ached. He reached out, covering her small hand with his. "Anna, you are so brave to remember that. What you heard is very important. Your mama left clues because she knew you'd be strong enough one day to share them." Anna nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Do you think Mark hurt her?" Daniel hesitated, then spoke with careful honesty. "I think your mama was afraid of him, and I think it's possible he did something very wrong. That's why we need to protect what she left behind, the journal, and this." He held up the small flash drive. Anna tilted her head. "What's on it?" "I don't know yet. But tomorrow we'll find out." The next day, Daniel contacted Anderson and arranged for a secure tech expert to analyze the flash drive. They met in a discreet office downtown, away from the polished gleam of Daniel's usual business dealings. The man, a quiet professional with sharp glasses, worked in silence as the files loaded. On the screen appeared scanned documents, financial ledgers, and recordings, hours of phone calls and conversations. One file caught Daniel's eye, a voice recording dated 2 weeks before Anna's mother's death. They pressed play. First came the sound of her mother's voice, steady but strained. "Mark, I won't let you take control of Anna's trust. That money is for her education, her life, not your gambling, not your debts." Then Mark's voice, low and venomous. "You think anyone will believe you? You're weak, Eleanor. Always sick, always hysterical. When you're gone, no one will question it." The recording cut abruptly. Anna, sitting beside Daniel, buried her face in his arm. "That's him. That's Mark." Daniel swallowed hard, rage rising in his chest. He had more than suspicion now. He had evidence. The tech expert turned, adjusting his glasses. "If these files are authentic, they're damning. But you'll need to present them carefully, chain of custody verification. Otherwise, their lawyers will tear it apart." Anderson nodded grimly. "It's enough to open a criminal investigation. But you need to brace yourself. Once the Collinses realize what you have, they'll come after you harder than before." That evening, back at the penthouse, Daniel found Anna sitting by the window, her gaze fixed on the skyline. She looked so small against the vastness of the city, her locket glinting faintly in the dim light. He sat beside her, speaking softly. "Anna, what we found today, it proves your mama was right. She was protecting you from something dangerous. And now it's our turn to protect her memory." Anna's eyes flickered with a mix of sorrow and determination. I want to tell the truth, even if it's scary. Mama always said the truth is like light. It makes the darkness go away. Daniel smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Your mama was wise, and you're just like her. For a moment, silence settled, warm and fragile. But then the intercom buzzed, sharp and unexpected. Daniel's body stiffened. Few people ever visited unannounced. He strode to the panel and pressed the button. Delivery for Mr. Hayes, a voice crackled. Daniel frowned. He hadn't ordered anything. Still, he instructed the concierge to send it up. Minutes later, a uniformed courier handed him a small package. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in bold letters. You think you've won, Hayes? You have no idea what you're stepping into. Give us the girl, or you'll regret it. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. Anna's safety was no longer a matter of legal battles. The Collinses were issuing threats. Direct ones. He folded the note, slipping it into his pocket before Anna could see. But as he turned, he realized she was watching him with sharp, knowing eyes. Was that from them? She asked quietly. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Yes. But listen to me, Anna. Threats are just words. We're stronger than them, especially now that we have the truth. Anna's small hand reached for his. As long as you don't leave me. His chest tightened. He squeezed her hand gently. Never. I'll never leave you. That night, as Daniel locked every door and set the security system, he knew the battle had shifted. The Collinses weren't going to wait for courtrooms and lawyers. They would strike in shadows, using fear as their weapon. But Daniel also knew something else. He wasn't the same man he had once been, haunted and silent about his own past. Protecting Anna had given him purpose, strength, and he would not fail her. As the city slept, Anna stirred in her dreams, whispering faintly, "Mama." Daniel sat by her bedside, watching over her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. He knew the whispers of the past were not done with them yet. Because somewhere in the darkness of the city, Mark Collins was planning his next move. And this time, he would not come with lawyers. Daniel Hayes had dealt with threats before. In the ruthless world of business, he had seen competitors try to frighten him with lawsuits, smear campaigns, even corporate espionage. But nothing compared to the note that now burned in his pocket. This wasn't business. This was Anna's life. And there was no negotiation. The morning after the threat arrived, Daniel gathered Anderson and the tech expert again, this time in a more secure location. A discreet office building that Daniel owned but rarely used. It had no logos, no markings, just a gray structure tucked between taller towers. Even the guards had been hand-picked by Daniel himself, many trusted from years of quiet dealings. On the table lay the journal, the flash drive, and the threatening letter. Anderson paced the room, his jaw tight. This isn't just intimidation, Daniel. This is a warning. They know you're close to something, and they're rattled. That means we're hitting nerves. Daniel leaned back, his hands clasped. Good. If they're rattled, they're vulnerable. I want more than suspicion. I want proof. The tech expert, still hunched over his laptop, cleared his throat. There's more on this drive we haven't explored. Password-protected files. It took me hours to bypass the encryption, but I've cracked part of it. He turned the screen toward them. Rows of spreadsheets filled with numbers, transactions that didn't belong to Eleanor Collins's modest accounts. These were offshore transfers, shell companies, large sums vanishing into hidden vaults. And then audio files. Hours of recordings. One caught Daniel's attention. It was labeled, Dinner, March 15th. His stomach twisted. That was the night Eleanor died. They pressed play. At first, there was nothing but clinking dishes, faint conversation. Eleanor's soft voice carried, "Anna, darling, finish your vegetables." A child's faint giggle, the little girl still innocent then, unaware of the storm brewing. Then Mark's voice, low and sharp. "Don't start with me tonight, Eleanor. You can't keep doing this, Mark. I saw the withdrawals. I saw the gambling slips. You're draining us. This is Anna's future, her education, her life." "Her future?" Mark's voice darkened. "What future do you think she'll have when you're gone?" There was a pause. A long, chilling pause. Then Eleanor's voice, strained but firm. "Don't you dare." Moments later, the sound of liquid pouring. Glass sliding. A faint cough from Eleanor. Then silence. The recording cut abruptly. Daniel's chest felt tight, rage burning in his veins. He looked at Anderson, who wore the expression of a man who had just seen murder unfold in real time. "This isn't circumstantial anymore," Anderson said quietly. "This is evidence. If authenticated, it proves premeditation. Daniel's gaze shifted to Anna, who sat curled in one of the chairs, listening with wide eyes. She had insisted on coming, though he'd tried to shield her. Her small hands trembled around the locket she wore. "He killed her," Anna whispered, her voice breaking. "He killed Mama." Daniel crouched before her, taking her trembling hands in his. "Anna, you don't need to listen to any more of this. I promise you, justice will be served." But Anna shook her head fiercely. "No. Mama wanted me to know. That's why she hid it. If we stopped listening, then she died for nothing." The strength in her small voice nearly shattered Daniel. She had endured so much, yet here she was, braver than most adults he knew. He nodded softly. "Then we'll see it through. Together." The rest of the files painted an even darker picture. Eleanor's private notes, more recordings, receipts of medication she hadn't ordered, sudden spikes in Mark's life insurance inquiries. Layer upon layer of evidence, woven together like a web. By the end of the session, the room felt heavy, as though suffocating under the weight of truth. Anderson broke the silence. "We can't sit on this. It's enough to involve the authorities. But Daniel, you have to be prepared. Once we take this step, it's war. The Collinses will throw everything at us." Daniel's jaw hardened. "Let them. They've hidden in shadows long enough. It's time to drag them into the light." That night, back at the penthouse, Daniel found Anna drawing quietly at the kitchen counter. She had sketched a small house, surrounded by trees, with a woman and child holding hands in front of it. Daniel recognized Eleanor from the gentle curls in her hair. Anna looked up. "Do you think Mama knows we found the truth?" Daniel smiled faintly, though his chest ached. "I think she does. And I think she's proud of you." Anna set down her crayon. "Do you think she's happy?" He hesitated. "I think she's at peace. Because you're safe now." Anna tilted her head. "Safe? But they're still out there. What if they come for me?" Daniel bent down, looking her in the eyes. "If they come, they'll find me waiting. And I promise you, Anna, no one will ever take you away from me." For a moment she studied him, then whispered, "You sound like Mama when she used to tuck me in. She always said she'd never let anything hurt me." Daniel's throat tightened. He placed a hand gently over her heart. "And now I say the same. You'll never be alone again." But as much as he wanted to believe it, the unease lingered. The threatening letter hadn't been idle. Mark Collins was a man backed into a corner, and desperate men were dangerous. 2 nights later, proof of that arrived. Daniel was returning from a late meeting with Anderson when the elevator opened onto his private floor. The penthouse was dark, save for a faint glow under Anna's bedroom door. But something felt wrong. The air was heavy still. He stepped inside cautiously, his instincts sharp. Then he saw it, on the coffee table, a single white envelope. No postage, no markings. It hadn't come through the concierge. Someone had been inside. Heart pounding, Daniel tore it open. Inside was a photograph. Anna, taken from a distance as she played in the park 2 days earlier. Smiling unaware. And beneath the photo a note. "Next time, we won't just watch." Daniel's blood ran cold. He rushed to Anna's room, flinging the door open. She was asleep, curled under her blanket, her rabbit tucked under her chin. Relief washed through him, but it was poisoned by fury. He stood there in the doorway, watching her sleep, his fists clenched. Proof in files and recordings was one thing, but now it was personal. The Collinses weren't waiting for court. They were circling like wolves, daring him to make a move. Daniel knew what he had to do. The evidence was ready, the authorities could be brought in. But he would need to move faster, stronger, before the Collinses struck again. Because now, the shadows weren't just whispering. They were closing in. And somewhere in the city, Mark Collins was planning his next strike. The courtroom smelled of varnished wood and stale paper, the air humming with whispers as reporters filled the benches. This wasn't supposed to be a spectacle, yet the Collins name carried weight, drawing curious onlookers like moths to flame. Outside, cameras flashed in a frenzy, hungry for scandal. Inside, the stage was set for war. Daniel sat at the plaintiff's table, Anderson by his side, a mountain of files stacked before them. To his right, just a few feet away, Mark Collins leaned back in his chair with the smug confidence of a man who had long manipulated systems to his favor. His lawyers flanked him, sharply dressed predators with eyes like steel. Anna sat quietly between Daniel and Anderson, her small frame dwarfed by the towering furniture. She clutched her rabbit tightly, the locket at her neck hidden beneath her dress. Though her chin was lifted, Daniel could feel the tremor in her hand as it brushed his. He placed his palm gently over hers, anchoring her. The judge, a stern woman with sharp glasses, called the room to order. This court will hear arguments concerning the guardianship of Anna Collins and allegations surrounding the death of Eleanor Collins. Gasps rippled through the gallery at the mention of Eleanor's death. Until now, it had been whispered rumors, tabloid speculation. Today it was laid bare. Mark's lead attorney rose first. Your Honor, the opposition will attempt to paint my client as a villain, but the truth is far simpler. Mr. Collins seeks to ensure his niece receives the stability and care she deserves. Mr. Hayes, though financially capable, is not family. His connection to the child is tenuous at best, his motives questionable. Daniel's jaw tightened. Questionable motives? He had nearly destroyed himself trying to protect Anna. But he stayed silent, letting Anderson take the lead. Anderson stood, calm and precise. Your Honor, stability is not found in blood alone. It is found in love, protection, and truth. Mr. Hayes has provided Anna with safety the Collins family never offered. Furthermore, we intend to present evidence that not only disqualifies Mark Collins from guardianship, but implicates him directly in the untimely death of Eleanor Collins. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Mark's face tightened for the first time, his arrogance faltering. The judge rapped her gavel. Order. Continue. Anderson laid out the foundation carefully. Eleanor's journal, her notes of fear, her recorded pleas. Then came the audio, the March 15th dinner. The room fell into a suffocating silence as Eleanor's voice played, her desperation etched in every word. And then Mark's reply, dripping with venom. What future do you think she'll have when you're gone? When the recording ended, the silence lingered, heavy and accusatory. Reporters scribbled furiously. The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable. Mark's attorney rose swiftly, voice sharp. This recording is unverified, Your Honor. Digital files are easily manipulated. Without expert authentication, this is inadmissible as evidence of wrongdoing. Anderson expected this. We have already submitted the files to an independent forensic examiner. Preliminary results confirm authenticity. Final certification is forthcoming. The judge nodded slowly. Proceed, but tread carefully. We will not convict a man in this courtroom today. This matter is guardianship, not criminal trial. It was a warning, yet one that hinted the judge was listening. Mark leaned forward, glaring across the aisle. His lips curled into a smile meant for Daniel alone, a silent message. You won't win this. Daniel didn't flinch. Instead, he reached for Anna's hand again, steadying her. She looked up at him, wide-eyed but unbroken. The proceedings stretched long into the afternoon. Mark's attorneys clawed viciously, painting Eleanor as unstable, exaggerating her illness, calling her journal the writings of a paranoid woman. They even tried to question Daniel's character, dragging up old business disputes, failed relationships, anything to cast shadows on him. But Anderson was relentless, turning each strike back upon them. If Eleanor Collins was so unstable, why did she predict, months before her death, that Mark would try to seize Anna's inheritance? Why do her notes match the financial trail we've uncovered? Why do her fears align with the very threats Mr. Hayes has recently received? The gallery buzzed with every revelation. Yet beneath the legal fireworks, Daniel felt an unease growing in his chest. He couldn't shake the memory of the photograph left in his home, the proof someone had been watching Anna. And as he glanced toward the gallery, his blood chilled. A man sat 2 rows back, too well-dressed to be a reporter, too still to be casual. His eyes were fixed not on the lawyers, not on the judge, but on Anna. Daniel's muscles tightened. He leaned toward Anderson, voice low. We may have a problem. Anderson followed his gaze subtly, his brow furrowing. Security? I'll handle it, Daniel muttered. When the court adjourned for a recess, Daniel guided Anna quickly from the room, keeping her close. 2 security men he trusted met them in the hallway, forming a protective barrier. Still, his pulse hammered. The Collinses weren't relying only on lawyers. They were preparing something else. Outside, reporters swarmed like sharks, shouting questions, snapping photos. Mr. Hayes, is it true you believe Mark Collins murdered his sister-in-law? Anna, how do you feel about your uncle? Daniel shielded Anna with his arm, pushing through the chaos until they reached the waiting car. Inside, she sat silently, her face pale. Why were they asking me questions? She whispered. Daniel's heart twisted. Because people don't always know what's true, Anna. But you don't have to answer them. All you need to do is be brave, just like today. She nodded faintly, but her eyes remained clouded. I don't like when they say bad things about Mama. She wasn't crazy. She was scared. Daniel brushed a hand through her hair. I know. and soon everyone else will know too. That night, the penthouse felt less like a sanctuary and more like a fortress under siege. Security was doubled, cameras checked, alarms tested. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Anna fell asleep clutching her rabbit, exhaustion pulling her under despite the storm around her. Daniel sat awake in the living room, Eleanor's journal open in his hands. He turned to the last entry once more. If anything happens to me, please protect Anna. She is stronger than she knows. Trust her heart. She will remember what matters. Daniel closed the journal, exhaling slowly. He had promised Eleanor, though she had never known him, and he would not fail her. But as midnight settled, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was a video. Daniel pressed play and froze. The footage showed Anna's schoolyard, empty in the moonlight. Then the camera shifted, zooming slowly on the swings where she often played. A man's voice whispered from behind the camera. Safe for now. The video cut to black. Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. The Collinses weren't bluffing. They were escalating. And tomorrow, the courtroom would no longer be the only battlefield. The city slept under a thin drizzle, streetlights casting halos on the wet pavement, but Daniel Hayes did not. He sat in the penthouse living room, staring at the faint glow of security monitors, every muscle in his body wound tight. The video from the night before replayed in his mind, the swings swaying in the empty playground, the whisper, safe for now. It was no longer a veiled threat. It was a declaration. Anna had fallen asleep on the couch that evening, too tired to climb into her bed after another draining day in court. Daniel hadn't the heart to move her. She lay curled beneath a blanket, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, her breathing soft and steady. For a moment, she looked like any other child, untouched by shadows. But the truth clawed at Daniel's chest. She was the target of men who would do anything to claim her. And tonight, he feared they would try. Around midnight, Anderson checked in, his voice low and urgent over the phone. Daniel, we've got chatter. My contacts say the Collinses are restless. Mark's legal team knows the case is slipping. If they can't win in court, they'll try something outside of it, Daniel finished grimly. His eyes flicked to the monitors again, watching the guards stationed at the building's entrance. Let them come. I'll be ready. But even as he said it, dread twisted his gut. Readiness wasn't enough. These weren't boardroom rivals. These were men capable of murder. Eleanor's recordings had proved that. At 1:17 a.m., the first alarm tripped. Daniel shot to his feet, his heart hammering. On the monitors, one of the exterior cameras flickered, static buzzing across the screen. A blackout, deliberate. The guard at the front lobby moved to investigate, but Daniel never saw him return. He didn't hesitate. He moved swiftly to Anna, scooping her into his arms. She stirred, mumbling, "Uncle Daniel?" "Shoo," he whispered, already moving toward the reinforced safe room tucked behind his office. "Stay quiet, sweetheart. We're playing a hiding game. Can you do that for me?" She nodded sleepily, clutching her rabbit tighter. He placed her gently inside, kneeling so his eyes met hers. "No matter what you hear, you don't open this door until I come back. Understand?" Anna's eyes widened, finally sensing the danger. "But what if?" Daniel pressed a finger to her lips. "Trust me. I promised your mama I'd protect you. That's what I'm going to do." He closed the heavy door, locking it with a code only he and Anderson knew. As silence sealed her inside, Daniel's chest tightened. Then he turned, his face hardening. The penthouse went dark. The power cut suddenly, plunging the space into shadows. Daniel's eyes adjusted quickly. He knew his own home better than any intruder could. He moved silently, retrieving the pistol from the locked drawer beneath his desk, something he had never wanted to use, but tonight he would. A faint click echoed from the balcony. Daniel's grip tightened. Glass cracked, a soft crunch against tile, and then the outline of a man slipped inside. The intruder was dressed in black, movements calculated, a silenced weapon in hand. He didn't come alone. 2 more shadows followed, fanning out across the living room. Daniel's pulse slowed. This was no random break-in. This was orchestrated. They weren't here to steal. They were here for Anna. One man whispered, barely audible, "Check the back rooms. The girl's here." Daniel stepped from the shadows, his voice calm but lethal. "Looking for someone?" The intruders froze, startled by the sudden presence. Then the first man lifted his weapon. Daniel didn't hesitate. The pistol cracked, the sound muffled in the thick air. The man dropped, his weapon clattering across the floor. The others cursed, ducking for cover. The penthouse erupted into chaos. Furniture splintered, glass shattered. Daniel moved with precision, driving them away from Anna's safe room, forcing them toward the balcony. Every shot he took was deliberate, controlled. But they were trained too. One circled wide, firing a round that grazed Daniel's arm. He hissed, pain burning, but he didn't falter. "You won't get her," Daniel growled through clenched teeth. The intruder sneered. "You can't protect her forever. Collins owns this city." Daniel fired again, dropping him. Only one remained now, breathing heavily from behind an overturned chair. Then, to Daniel's horror, the man shouted, not to him, but into a hidden earpiece. "We've got resistance. Bring the van." The words froze Daniel's blood. This wasn't just an infiltration, it was an extraction. He lunged forward, shooting the final intruder before he could rise, but the message was already sent. Somewhere below, others were moving. Daniel raced to the monitors again. Several cameras were still offline, but one flickered back to life just long enough to show a dark van pulling into the underground garage. Too late. They were coming. His phone buzzed. Anderson. Daniel answered breathlessly. "They're inside," Daniel said. "I'm 5 minutes out," Anderson replied. "Hold them. Do not let them reach Anna." Daniel's eyes hardened. "They won't." He reloaded, blood dripping from his arm, and positioned himself by the elevator doors. The hum of machinery grew louder, the numbers climbing. 17. 18. 19. Anna's face flashed in his mind, her wide eyes filled with trust. Eleanor's final words echoed, "Protect her. She is stronger than she knows." The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. 4 men surged out, heavily armed. Daniel opened fire. The hallway thundered with violence, every shot echoing like a drumbeat of war. Daniel dropped one, then another, but a bullet slammed into his shoulder, spinning him back. He staggered, gritting his teeth, forcing himself upright. "You're not taking her," he roared, his voice raw with fury. The remaining men advanced, relentless, pushing him back toward Anna's room. Daniel fought like a man possessed, every ounce of strength, rage, and desperation fueling him. But they kept coming, step by step, like shadows made flesh. Then, the sharp crack of a rifle from behind. One of the attackers collapsed. Then another. Daniel whipped around. Anderson stood in the doorway, rifle smoking, his face grim. "Move," Anderson shouted, covering him. Together, they pushed the intruders back, forcing the survivors toward the elevator. The men retreated, dragging their wounded, firing wildly as they withdrew. The doors slid shut, sealing them away for now. The sudden silence rang in Daniel's ears. He leaned heavily against the wall, blood seeping from his wounds. Anderson hurried to him. "You're hit." "I'll live," Daniel rasped. His eyes darted to the safe room. "Anna." He staggered to the door, punching in the code with shaking fingers. The lock disengaged, the heavy door creaking open. Anna was inside, crouched in the corner, tears streaming down her face. When she saw him, she flew into his arms, sobbing into his chest. "I was so scared," she whispered. Daniel held her tightly, ignoring the pain in his shoulder, his arm, everything. "It's over. You're safe. I promised you, didn't I?" But even as he said the words, he knew it wasn't over. The Collinses had failed tonight, but they would try again. And next time they might not miss. As Anna clung to him, Daniel met Anderson's eyes over her head. His friend's expression was grim, unspoken words heavy between them. This was no longer about courts, evidence, or inheritance. This was survival. And somewhere out there, Mark Collins was waiting for his next chance. The night after the failed kidnapping, Daniel Hayes stood before the towering windows of his penthouse, staring out at the sleepless city. His shoulder throbbed from the wound, his arm wrapped tight in fresh bandages Anderson had applied. Yet the physical pain was nothing compared to the fire boiling in his chest. The Collinses had crossed the final line. They had broken into his home, tried to steal Anna from her bed, and nearly succeeded. If not for Anderson's arrival, she might have been gone. Anna was asleep again now, tucked in with her rabbit and a nightlight glowing soft on the wall. Daniel had stayed with her until her eyes finally closed, whispering gentle words of comfort he wasn't sure he even believed. "You're safe. I've got you." But in the silence of the night, he asked himself, for how long? Anderson broke the quiet, stepping beside him. "You know they won't stop. Tonight was a warning. Next time, they'll bring an army." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we end it. On our terms." Anderson studied him carefully. "You mean?" "Yes," Daniel cut in. "I've spent weeks defending, hiding, waiting. No more. Mark Collins thinks he owns this city. He thinks he can hurt Anna, erase Eleanor, and buy his way out. But he's forgotten one thing. Daniel's voice hardened like steel. I have more than money. I have truth. And I will bury him with it. The plan began that night. For years, Daniel had built companies, toppled competitors, reshaped markets with quiet precision. Now he turned those same skills into a weapon. He assembled his team of investigators, lawyers, and trusted allies. Every scrap of evidence Anderson had gathered, every recording Eleanor left behind, every financial trail the Collinses had hidden, Daniel brought it all together into a single devastating case. But he knew documents alone wouldn't save Anna. The Collinses were too ruthless, too well connected. He needed to expose them so completely that no judge, no politician, no ally could shield them. The world itself had to see. The trap was simple in design but perilous in execution. He would lure Mark and Cynthia Collins into revealing themselves, not just as cruel guardians, but as criminals. And he would do it under the eyes of the law and the media. 2 nights later, the opportunity came. The Collinses, desperate after their failed kidnapping, filed an emergency custody hearing, claiming Daniel was unfit and unstable. It was their final card, played in haste, and Daniel seized it. The hearing was set for Friday morning in the downtown courthouse. Anna was terrified. She clung to Daniel's hand as they walked into the grand marble halls, whispers following them. The press had already swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Mr. Hayes, is it true you kidnapped the girl? Did you stage the break-in to smear the Collins family? Daniel shielded Anna from the storm, his expression unreadable. Keep walking, he murmured to her, squeezing her hand. Inside the courtroom, Mark sat at the plaintiff's table, his smug grin thinly disguising his desperation. Beside him, Cynthia's sharp eyes gleamed with malice. Their lawyer, a slick-tongued man with a reputation for bending truth, smirked confidently. Across the aisle, Daniel and Anderson sat together, Anna between them. Daniel's lawyer, a calm and razor-sharp woman named Evelyn Shaw, whispered, "It's time." Just as we planned, the judge entered. Proceedings began. At first, the Collinses dominated the floor. Their lawyer painted Daniel as an unfit guardian, a reckless billionaire playing hero with a child who wasn't his. They produced fabricated witness statements, doctored financial records, even a psychiatrist's false report declaring Daniel emotionally unstable from his childhood trauma. Mark leaned back, smug again, as though victory were assured. But Daniel had been patient. He let them talk. He let their lies stack higher and higher, until the weight was unbearable. Then, at the precise moment, Evelyn rose. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "the defense would like to submit Exhibit A." The lights dimmed slightly as a screen descended. The first recording played, Eleanor's voice, trembling but clear, speaking from beyond the grave. "If you're hearing this, something has happened to me. My husband, Mark Collins, has been threatening me for months. He wants Anna's inheritance. He's growing desperate." The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, the judge banging her gavel. Mark's face blanched white. Evelyn did not stop. "Exhibit B." The second recording, Cynthia's cold voice. "It'll look like an accident. A glass of wine before bed. No one will suspect." The courtroom froze in horror. Mark shot to his feet. "Lies. Fabrications. This is illegal." But Evelyn raised a hand. "Exhibit C." On screen now appeared financial records, traced by Anderson's team. Secret transfers from Eleanor's estate into offshore accounts controlled by Mark and Cynthia. Dates aligned perfectly with Eleanor's death. The jury's faces hardened. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. But Daniel wasn't finished. He rose slowly, his gaze fixed on Mark. His voice was steady, deliberate. "You wanted the world to see me as unstable. But the truth is, the world needs to see you for what you are." He nodded subtly toward the back of the courtroom. The doors opened. 2 men stepped in, federal agents. Behind them, a half-dozen reporters surged with cameras. The agents strode forward, handing the judge a warrant. "Mark Collins, Cynthia Collins, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and the suspected murder of Eleanor Collins." Chaos exploded. Mark roared in protest, shoving chairs, his mask shattering. Cynthia shrieked as handcuffs snapped onto her wrists. The press captured every second, flashes strobing like lightning. Anna buried her face against Daniel's side, trembling. But for the first time in months, his arm around her felt like a fortress no one could breach. As Mark was dragged past, he twisted, his face red with fury. "This isn't over, Hayes. I'll—" Daniel cut him off, his voice cold as ice. "Yes, Mark. It is. The Collinses were hauled away. Silence fell heavy, broken only by Anna's soft sobs. The judge composed herself, then turned to Daniel. "Mr. Hayes," she said firmly, "given the evidence presented and the circumstances, custody of Anna Collins is hereby awarded to you permanently. This court recognizes you as her legal guardian." Daniel's knees nearly buckled. Relief surged through him like a flood. He turned to Anna, who stared at him wide-eyed, uncertain if she'd heard right. He smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. "It means you're mine now. Forever." She flung her arms around his neck, crying into his shoulder. For the first time, they weren't tears of fear, but of release, of hope. The cameras outside captured them as they left the courthouse, Daniel holding Anna's hand, her rabbit tucked under her arm. But the world didn't see a billionaire and an orphan anymore. They saw a family. Weeks passed. Healing was slow but steady. Anna began school again, her laughter slowly returning. She painted drawings for Daniel's office, filling the walls with color. Each night, she asked him to tuck her in, and each time he whispered, "I'll be here when you wake." Daniel too began to heal. He found that in protecting Anna, he had also saved himself, from the shadows of his childhood, from the loneliness he'd carried for years. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Anna sat beside him on the balcony, her small hand in his. "Uncle Daniel?" "Yes, sweetheart? Do you think Mama can see us now?" Daniel looked at the sky, the golden light breaking through clouds. His voice was soft but certain. "Yes, Anna. And I think she's proud." They sat together in silence, the weight of the past finally lifting, replaced by something brighter, hope. And though scars remained, both knew one truth above all: the cycle of cruelty had been broken. In its place stood love, fierce and unshakable. For Anna, the little girl forced once to sleep in the cold, had finally found her home. And for Daniel, the man who vowed to protect her, he had finally found his family. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.